Never react. Never explain. Just ignore. 3 simple rules that separate emotionally powerful people from emotionally controlled people. Batman understood something most people never will. Every reaction costs energy, every unnecessary explanation gives away power, and every distraction steals time you'll never get back. Why do strangers have so much control over your emotions? Why do you feel the need to defend every decision you make? Why does criticism, disrespect, even silence from someone else affect you so deeply? What if the strongest response was no response at all? Today, you're going to learn the method Batman uses to protect his mind. Not a costume, not a cave, not a car that outruns bullets, a discipline, a way of moving through the world untouched by noise. Batman doesn't react to every insult. He doesn't argue with everyone who challenges him. He doesn't waste energy proving himself to people who were never going to understand him anyway. He chooses where his attention goes. That single choice is the difference between a man who is controlled and a man who controls himself. This is the Batman method. Emotional discipline, silent confidence, selective attention. Let's begin. Why reaction gives away your power here is something most people never realize. The moment someone can control your emotions, they control your behavior. A single comment ruins your morning. A single look from a stranger changes your mood for hours. A single disagreement, and suddenly you're replaying it at midnight, rehearsing what you should have said. That is not strength. That is a leash. And someone else is holding it. Anger feels powerful in the moment, but anger is often just ego, wearing a louder voice. Ego needs to win. Ego needs to be right. Ego needs the last word. Batman never needed the last word, because Batman was never fighting for approval. He wasn't performing for an audience. He wasn't trying to convince Gotham he was right. He simply acted and let the outcome speak. Every time you react without thinking, you hand over a piece of your power. You let someone else's words decide your state of mind. You let a stranger's opinion rearrange your entire day. Batman studied his enemies before he ever engaged them. He understood their patterns, their triggers, their weaknesses, and the most dangerous men in Gotham all shared one flaw. They reacted. They could be baited. They could be provoked into mistakes. Batman, on the other hand, was almost impossible to bait because he had already decided, long before the moment arrived, what deserved his energy and what didn't. This is where most people lose their power. Not in the big moments, in the small ones, the comment they didn't need to answer, the argument they didn't need to win, the validation they didn't need to chase. But there's a deeper layer to this, one that explains why Batman almost never opens his mouth to defend himself. Why Batman never explains himself. Notice something about Batman. He rarely explains his choices. He doesn't hold press conferences. He doesn't correct every rumor about him. He doesn't argue with people who misunderstand his methods. Why? Because people who are secure in who they are don't need everyone else to agree with them. Over-explaining is often a quiet cry for approval. It says, "Please understand me. Please see that I'm right. Please validate what I already know to be true." But the moment you need someone else's agreement to feel confident in your own decision, you've given that person power over you. Batman's confidence didn't come from what people believed about him. It came from what he knew about himself. His identity wasn't built from the outside in. It was built from the inside out. This is a crucial distinction. Silence is not the same as avoidance. Batman still communicates when it matters. He still explains himself to Alfred, to Gordon, to the people who've earned that access to his mind. That's healthy communication. What he refuses to do is justify himself to people who were never going to listen anyway. There is a difference between explaining yourself to someone who deserves clarity and defending yourself to someone who only wants a reaction. Batman lets his actions speak, because actions cannot be twisted the way words can. A person can misquote your words. They cannot misquote your results. This is why the strongest people you know rarely argue online, rarely defend their choices to strangers, rarely explain themselves to people who have already made up their minds. They let time and results do the explaining. But knowing when to stay silent is only half of the method. The other half is knowing what to ignore completely. The power of ignoring distractions. Ignoring isn't weakness. Ignoring is intelligent attention management. Batman ignores noise, not responsibility. This distinction matters more than anything else in this video. He never ignores a crime in progress. He never ignores someone who genuinely needs him. But he ignores the noise that surrounds every mission. The critics who say he's too extreme. The politicians who say he's a vigilante and nothing more. The tabloids that print whatever story sells the most papers that week. None of it changes what he does that night. None of it enters his mind while he's making a decision that actually matters. Most people live the opposite way. They give their full attention to the loudest voice in the room instead of the most important task in front of them. Online negativity, unnecessary criticism, other people's drama, these things feel urgent. But urgency and importance are not the same thing. A stranger's opinion of you feels urgent in the moment. It is almost never important. Your energy is not infinite. Every argument you engage in, every distraction you allow into your mind, every piece of drama you absorb, is energy you will not get back for the things that actually matter. Batman understood this better than anyone. Gotham never stops generating noise. If he responded to every criticism, every rumor, every insult thrown his way, he would have no energy left to actually protect the city. So he made a decision. Protect your energy like it's the most valuable resource you have, because it is. This is where people lose the most power without even realizing it. Not through big betrayals, through 1,000 small distractions they never had the discipline to ignore. But ignoring distraction is only possible if your mind can stay calm under pressure. And that calm is where real strength lives. Emotional control is real strength. Anyone can be calm when life is easy. The real test is staying calm when everything inside you wants to explode. Batman stays calm, not because he feels nothing, but because he thinks before he reacts. There is a gap between what happens to you and how you respond to it. Most people collapse that gap completely. Something happens, and the reaction is instant. Batman widens that gap on purpose. In that space between the event and the response, he thinks, he evaluates, he chooses. That gap is where all his power lives. This is not suppression. Suppression is pretending the emotion doesn't exist. Emotional mastery is feeling the emotion fully and still choosing your response with a clear mind. Patience is not the absence of urgency. It's the presence of discipline. Stoic thinking teaches something simple but rarely practiced. You don't control what happens to you. You control what you do next. Batman has lost people he loved. He has been betrayed, outnumbered, underestimated, and hunted. And still, in almost every scene, his voice stays level. His hands stay steady. His mind stays clear. Because he trained his mind the same way he trained his body. Deliberately, consistently, under pressure, long before the real test ever arrived. This calmness isn't a personality trait he was born with. It's a decision, repeated so many times, it became who he is. And that decision leads directly into the next lesson, one that decides where all of this discipline is finally pointed. Choose your battles wisely. Batman doesn't fight every fight. He fights the ones that matter. He could chase down every petty criminal in Gotham every single night. He doesn't. He focuses on the threats that actually endanger the city. The rest, he lets the police handle. This is one of the most overlooked parts of his character. Focus requires elimination. You cannot give maximum energy to everything. So the strongest people learn to filter. what deserves my time, what deserves my silence, what deserves my full attention, and what deserves nothing at all. Boundaries are not coldness, they are focus, applied to your own life. Every time you say no to a distraction, you are saying yes to something that actually matters. Every time you decline to argue with someone who is never going to change their mind, you protect the hours you could spend building something real. Batman's purpose was never in question because his priorities were never in question. He knew exactly what mattered, so everything else became easy to ignore. This final principle changes something fundamental in how you move through the world. Because once you know what deserves your energy, you finally understand what it means to become untouchable. Become untouchable, imagine becoming the kind of person who no longer needs to prove anything, who isn't controlled by criticism, who isn't hijacked by every distraction that enters the room, who isn't rattled by people trying to provoke a reaction. Imagine protecting your peace the way Batman protects Gotham, quietly, consistently, without needing applause for doing it. This is not about becoming cold or distant. It's about becoming selective. Selective with your emotions, selective with your explanations, selective with your attention. The world will always offer you a reason to react. Someone will always say something designed to provoke you. Something will always demand your attention that doesn't deserve it. The question is no longer whether these moments will come. They will. The question is whether you'll hand over your power the way you always have, or whether you'll finally choose differently. Batman's greatest strength was never silence alone. It was knowing when silence was more powerful than words. Real confidence doesn't need permission. Real discipline doesn't need applause. Real strength doesn't react to every challenge that comes its way. It chooses, with total clarity, where its energy goes. The moment you stop reacting to everything, you finally begin controlling yourself. And when you control yourself, the world loses its power over you. That's the Batman method. If today you're choosing peace over pointless reactions, comment 3 words. I stay calm, not for this channel, for yourself. Because the strongest person in the room is often the one who never needed to prove it.